Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Ishan and you are watching Programming with Ishan. Today in this chapter we will be exploring the flow of Angular applications, not just theoretically like how we did in our previous chapters, but actually we will be trying to understand and analyze them on the real code using the project we created in our first chapter of the course, that is the first Angular app project. Later in this video, we will also be discussing how to create the core concept files like components, directives, services, as well as the pipes. And while doing that, we will also discuss the metadata related to these files in details. So without any further ado, let's get started. Alright, the very first file we need to understand is the main.ts file. This file is actually considered as the entry point to your Angular framework. Reason being, whenever you run your Angular application, this is the place where the execution starts. So the first thing which we notice here is a conditional check. So for you to understand, this file is responsible for mostly two parts. The first one is enabling the production mode, that is switching your application from a development mode to production mode. And when I say production mode, it means this method is responsible for disabling certain features like development mode checks, debugging tools, as well as optimizing the change detection strategies. This in turn helps your performance of the application on the production, because you do not require the development mode checks and all in the production server, right? So whenever you are on the production server, this environment.production is set to true and your enable prod mode method is called. The second part is the platform browser dynamic. This is responsible for creating a platform where your Angular application can run on the browser. Also, it is responsible for preparing the Angular framework to bootstrap the root module, that is your app module. And because the app module gets bootstrapped here, that is why we call that module as a root module. So this is all about your main.ts file. So now we already understood how Angular bootstraps the application using the main.ts file. So let's move on to another crucial file, that is your app.module.ts. This file holds the app module class, which is the root module. So let's try to understand that file. We already know that every Angular application at least consists of one module that is called as the root module, which is defined inside this app.module.ts file only. This module is decorated using a decorator named as ngModule, @ngModule decorator, which provides metadata to your Angular application, telling that this specific file should be treated as an Angular module. Why it is important? It is important because it acts as a configuration object for your module. It tells Angular which component, services, and models belong to this specific module where the ngModule decorator is being used. It also allows the app to be divided into multiple parts, making it scalable and maintainable. Now we will try to break this ngModule metadata into separate parts and see what each part is responsible for. Coming to the first one, that is the declarations. So this array list consists of all the components, directives, and pipes which belongs to this module. Right now we have only app component here, but as we build the application, we will be having more components and other directives and pipes also included in this declaration object. So this helps Angular to understand which all core concepts, including the components, directives, and pipes, belong to this specific module. The second one is the imports object. Imports array helps to understand Angular which all other modules are there on which this module is dependent on. So right now we have this browser module and app routing module. Browser module is something which is very essential for any Angular application running in a web browser. It allows the application to use features like ngModel. These are the form related features which we will be discussing soon. Then comes the provider. Right now we don't have any provider in this example, but this is where we register services that should be available application wide. Example, API services and all, which we will be creating later, that needs to be utilized throughout the application. They all can be registered here also. Why also? Because we have an alternative now to register them at the root level. We will be discussing them when we will discuss about the services. in specific. Next one is the bootstrap. Bootstrap array tells Angular which component should be loaded first when the application start. So herein we have the app component, and we already have discussed the app component is called as the root component because it is the first component getting bootstrap in the root module of the application. This is all about your app module, which is available in the app.module.ts file. So let's talk about the root component of our Angular application, that is the app component, which gets bootstrapped in app module, which we have seen just now. And similar to how we have a @ng module decorator in app module file, we also have a @component decorator in the component file. And this decorator is responsible for providing the metadata about how a component should behave, and for Angular applications to understand and treat this file as a component file. To understand the @component decorator better, let's get into the individual parts of it. So the first one what we have is a selector. Selector defines the custom HTML tag that represents the component. In our case, we have the selector named as app-root. This is also used in index.html, and Angular internally replaces it with this component's template file. Now when I say template file, it means the HTML part of that. The next property what we have is a template URL, where we have given the reference of app.component.html file. So this is the template file, and next to that we have a style URLs, where we are defining the external styles, which is linked to this app component, and the scope of that style is limited to this component itself. It helps to avoid the global CSS and all conflicts, right? Next to that we have this class definition, where we actually write all the component logic. Right now we have a title variable with the value of first Angular app, which we will be using in our templates to show the value on the UI. We will discuss that soon in the next chapter, when we will be discussing about the components in detail and all the related properties and component interaction and everything. So this much is enough for you to understand about how the app component is behaving, and how we can create a file as a component with @component decorator. Now let's talk about the index.html file. We already have discussed about single page applications in our previous chapters, and we know that in single page applications the browser requests for only a single HTML file and related JavaScript files, which helps the application to run. So in the Angular framework, where we also are following the single page application structure, we have this index.html file as that single HTML file. Here what you're seeing is a development mode HTML structure, where we have a app-root custom HTML tag mentioned in the body tag. This app-root selector represents the app component, which we have seen like a minute back in the previous section. And this app-root line is actually a placeholder for the Angular app to replace it with the app components HTML template. So that's how your first UI gets rendered in your Angular framework application. Now this is how it is going to work for development mode. Here the ngserve command will be responsible for internally managing the Angular app replacement and all. But when it comes to the production server, or the server where you have deployed ahead of time compiled code, in that case your file structure will, not the file structure, the structure of the index.html will little bit modified. So this is the one. Here you can see you have multiple script tags also attached in the file, which is having the reference to runtime, polyfill scripts and main.js files. So these files will internally initiate the entry point, that is the main.ts file, and then the bootstrapping will happen, and afterwards your app component will get bootstrapped, and then the app-root will get replaced with the app components template. Now one point here, in the main.ts file of development mode you have platform, browser, dynamic, but when you are going to see the main.ts file of this deployed code on the server, it will be using a platform browser that is responsible for creating a platform for an ahead of time compiled code. So that's a difference between the ahead of time compiled one and just in time compiled code. So this is all about your index.html and how exactly Angular starts from the entry point and how we fetch the index.html and how Angular replaces the app root selector with the Angular app's first template. So that's all about how the flow of the code works. Up until now, we have discussed about the flow of Angular application, which involved the entry point main.ts file and everything about index.html and the app component and app modules. Also, we discussed about the decorators like ng module and @component decorator. Now we will discuss about the navigation part. So in any modern web application, navigation is one of the key features, and Angular provides router module for the purpose of configuring and managing those routes efficiently. The file we have is app-routing.module.ts and the class is app routing module. This app routing module class is also imported in the ng module, that is the root module of our application. So we already checked that in the app module we have two modules imported, that is the browser module as well as the app routing module. Now understanding of this module is important because this module is responsible for two things. One is to define all the list of routes which you are going to use in your application, and each of those routes will have a URL that is linked to a specific component. So for example, if you are having a user component, you can have a URL like /user and so on. And the next thing what it is responsible for is to register those routes with the router module, because it is important, as until and unless you register it with the router module, you won't be able to use it. So it is mandatory for those routes to be registered with router module. So we have this decorator @ng module where we have the imports array where we are registering the routes to the router module using the for root method. And the second one is the exports part. So that helps to make the router module available for all the other modules as well. So this is all what we have for app routing module, and next to that we are having the app.component.html file where I wanted to show you the router outlet tag. This router outlet tag is responsible for rendering all the routes what we have defined in the app routing module file. So you can consider this to be as a television where every time you change a channel, the channel appears inside the television. So you have a user channel, you have a dashboard channel, you have a home channel. All those things will be dynamically rendered in this specific television area, or you can say that space in the browser, space in the page dynamically. So that's all what we have on the app.component.html. So this sums up the whole flow of your Angular application code. Now let's try to create a few of the code concept files and discuss the metadata of those files, and then we will jump into the actual discussion on individual code concepts in the upcoming chapter. So now is the time to get our hands dirty. We will be trying to create some of the code concept files like the components, directives, pipes as well as services, both manually as well as using the ng generate commands. So first we will be trying to create a component. Let's say we are creating a profile component. But before to that, let me just start the Angular application because sometimes it takes time. Till the time it starts, we'll do our coding here. So let's create a folder named as a profile folder, and inside the profile folder we'll be having three files which will have the first one as the profile.component.ts, that is your component file where all the component logic goes in. Then we will be having profile.component.html, which is the template file that we'll be using for showing the UI on the browser. and then we will have the profile.component.scss file. That will be the file which is used for the styling purposes, and both this template and style file will be linked to the component file in the component decorator. So let's create that as well. Component decorator will have a selector tag which will have the value of a unique custom tag assigned to this component. Let's keep it as app profile, and we need to also attach the template and the style files to this component decorator. So for that purpose we have template URL, wherein we will give the path for the HTML file, and then we will assign the style URLs, wherein we'll give the path for the style file. As you can see, it's an array of style files, so you can provide multiple style sheets to this style files. And finally we'll be defining the class, that is profile component, with a constructor method and a variable, say title, with the value my name is profile component. We will be trying to print this title in our template, so let's have that inside a paragraph tag. You might be thinking, what are these braces for? This is called as interpolation in Angular. It's used to print the variable on your template. So whenever the value of this variable changes in the component, it will automatically get reflected here as well. The second part is the CSS file. So let's add some styles to this paragraph tag. Let's have a font size of 20px and font weight, let's say 700. Now we have created the component, we have successfully created the styles as well as the template, and we have attached them to the component also, but still there is something missing. So we need to add the route, and also we need to add this profile component to the route the root module of the application, that is your app module. So let's do that as well. First we'll define the route, wherein we'll define a path for this component so that it can be accessed on the browser. Let's have that name as profile, and the component linked to this path will be the profile component. Now the second thing is adding this profile component to our app modules declaration array, and finally we have done that. So we have done the changes what is required for this profile component to render on our screen. So let's go to the browser and see how it behaves. Localhost 4200, we are seeing a blank page. Reason being, we have not added the path. Let's add the profile path, and we got the result. My name is profile component. Now there is one more catch here in the component. In place of this template URL and style URLs, you can also provide the template as well as style directly. So in place of template URL, what I can do is I can just put a template key value with the template key, with the value of the actual HTML code which we wrote in our template, profile.component.html. So here let's add this paragraph tag with the title variable using the interpolation, and let's replace style URLs with styles, and in the styles array we'll add the actual style which we added in our profile.component.scss file. So let's have the font size as 20px, and to make a difference, let's have a color as red. Now let's see we see there is some error. Okay, so it expects a semicolon here. Fine, so we can see it's red in color. So this way of doing the template attachment and style is also possible, but it's always better to go for a separate file because it makes it very easy to maintain and read. So let's get back to the old structure. Now this is how you create a component manually. Now there is one more way of creating a component, that is using the ngGenerate command. So let's check that as well. Suppose I want to create a component with the name of, say, user component. So what I'll do is I'll just use ngGenerate component. Either you can use this, or in short you can just write nggc and the path or directly the component name. So let's say I call it as user and press an enter. Let's wait for that to create the file. Sometimes it takes time. Yeah, so we already got that. So you can see that we were successfully able to create 4 files, that is user.component.html, ts, scss and a spec.ts file. This spec.ts file is specifically used for the purpose of testing, unit testing, which we already have discussed in second chapter, I believe. And the catch here is this nggc command also adds this specific component to your app module. So if I go to the app module, you will see that the declaration array is already having user component. So this is an easier way of adding a component in your application. Similarly, we have commands for creating directives and services and pipes also. We'll check that as well. So we already have created a component, that is a profile component. So let's create a service for that component, which will provide the data required by the profile component. Okay, so the plan is to create a profile services, and that service will be linked with our profile component to get the data from profile service. And once the data is fetched, that data will be presented on the profiles template so that we can render it on our browser. So that's the whole plan. So let's create a service quickly. Before creating a service, let's create a services folder. So going forward, whatever service we'll create, we'll keep that service inside this services folder only. And in parallel, let's start the application as well. Now inside the service, we'll be creating a profile.service.ts file. Similar to how we have the decorators for components and modules, we also have a decorator for the services, which is @injectable, imported from the @angular/code library. Let's define the class. Okay. Now we will be creating a method inside this profile service class, that is get profile data. Let's keep the return type as any, and let's return an object with the values which is required. Sorry. Now we need to call this method from our profile component. So for that purpose, we need to first instantiate the service, the profile service, in our profile component. So let's open the profile component.ts, and to utilize a service in our component, we need to initiate them in our declare them in our constructor method. So let's do that. Private profile service, profile service. Fine. Okay. Now we have created an instance of profile service. This profile service will be this profile service variable can be used to call the method get profile data of this actual profile service class. So let's define a variable to hold that data in our component. Let's say profile data, and we will also be using a component lifecycle hook, about which we will be discussing in the upcoming chapter. But for now, just understand that this method will get called the moment the page is routed on the profile path. This dot profile data equals to profile service dot get profile data. Now we got the value from get profile data in our profile data variable. Now the same has to be printed on our or rendered on our template. So let's create a div element here. And we'll use the same interpolation for printing the profile data. Let's make a copy of these. Fine. So we created a service, we instantiated that service in our profile.component. We called that method and assigned it to a variable inside our lifecycle hook, that is ng-on-init. And finally, we presented them on our template as well. So let's try to see how it behaves on the browser. Okay, we can see we are having an error here that says no provider for profile services. So it is asking us to add this profile service we created in our app modules provider array. So let's do that. We already discussed we need to do this, right? And once we do that, let's see what response we get on the profile path. Here we got the response, right? Now there is one more thing. If you do not want to add this service every time in the providers, what you can do is in the versions above Angular 8, I believe, we have this option of adding a key value pair inside the @injectable decorator that is named as provided in. So when you provide the value as root, this service gets added to the root injector of your application, and it becomes available to be utilized throughout the application without adding the service into the provider array manually, right? So now we can also just refresh the page and check what happens. You can see it is still working, right? So this is one way of creating your service and connecting it into the profile component. When I say one way, I mean the creation of service manually we did, right? Let's try to do it using the ng-generate command. So for that purpose, we can use ng-generate service and /services path plus the new service which you want to create. So if I do this, we can see two files are generated. One is user.service.spec.ts. This is for the purpose of testing. And the other one is the actual service file where you will write your service logics. Also, you need to note this, that when you create this service file using this command, by default it gives you provided in root, so you don't need to add this service manually into the provider array of your app module, right? So this is all about how you create a service and how you can utilize that service in your component and so on, right? In the next section we'll be discussing how we can create a directive, and then we will also see how we can create a pipe. So till now we have seen the module files, we created the components, done with the routings. We also created the services and get the data from those services and presented them on our templates. Now let's do some manipulation with the DOM. Okay, and for that purpose we will be creating a directive that is also a core concept file, and the directive what we will be creating will actually be like a highlighter. So that directive will be added on this paragraph tag and all of these span tags. So whenever a user hovers on top of the text in the browser having that directive, the background and the color will change for them. And on mouse out, when the user hovers out from that text, when the focus is gone from that text, at that moment the default color and the background will be retained. So for that, let's first create a folder where we will keep the directive going forward, and let's have the file name as highlight.directive.ts. So similar to how we have a decorator for components, modules as well as the services, we also have a decorator for directives, that is at the rate directives, which is imported from Angular/core library. This directive decorator is having a property that is selector, which is similar to what we have in a component, uh, wherein we define a unique name for this directive, and the same name will be used in other templates. Let's keep the name as app highlighter. You might be thinking what are these square brackets are. So we are planning to create an attribute directive. So there are multiple directives like attribute directive, class directives, element directives, but attribute directives are the ones which are most commonly used in the applications. So we'll create a basic attribute directive and see how it behaves. So let's now define a class for the same. Now one thing what you need to know about directives are, these directives are solely responsible for the purpose of DOM manipulations. Now we can use the JavaScript codes to access the DOM and manipulate it, but using them in Angular can create security vulnerabilities. So for that purpose, Angular provides us two classes. One is an element ref that is very useful for the purpose of directly accessing the DOM elements, and the other one is renderer 2. So using that we can actually manipulate those DOMs properties, those DOM elements properties I mean. So we will be utilizing them in our highlight directive, and we'll see how it can manipulate or change the colors, background colors for the tags or elements where this directive is going to be used. So let's have two private properties, that is EL and renderer, which will be an instance of element ref as well as instance of renderer 2. Also, as our plan is to change the colors on mouse over and mouse out, so for that purpose we will have to listen to those events, and we will be using host listener in Angular for that purpose. Similarly, we'll create one more host listener for mouse leave event. And this is how we're gonna change the background color and color using the renderer and the element ref. This is for the background color. Now let's do the same for font. So let's have the background color as black and the font color as white, and on mouse leave let's make this one as red and black when the mouse enter event is fired, and on default let's keep this one. Also let's keep a default value for the tags which are going to use the app highlighter directive. So for that purpose we can add this code in our constructor. This creates your directive. Now we need to see how we can use this. So let's copy the selector value and paste that in the profile.component.html tags wherever we want to use it in this way. Now we already have discussed that any directive, pipes or components which we create needs to be added in the declaration array of our root module or to the module whichever it is relevant to. So let's get that highlight directive class name and copy that and paste it in our declaration array. Fine. So we created a directive folder, we added a highlight.directive.ts file. We have added a @directive decorator with a selector value of app highlighter, which will be utilized in the other templates. And in the constructor, we have used a instance of element ref and renderer2. Element ref is responsible for accessing the DOM, and renderer2 is responsible for manipulating the DOM. And then we are using the method from the renderer2 class, that is set style, to set the to actually change the background color for the element on which this selector will be added, right? So in this case, when we are adding app highlighter on the paragraph tag, so the P becomes the element, and the reference of that element we get by using element ref. So that is all how it works. Now let's check the output for the same. Okay, so we can see a black background and a white text on the screen for all the tags, like the paragraph tag and the span tags, and when we hover on top of it, we can see the change in the colors, right? So that's how you create a directive, and that's how an attribute directive is utilized in your templates. Now one more thing is remaining, that how we can create it using a ng-generate command. So let me show you that as well. ng-generate directive, give the path / let's say we are going to create a font size change directive. So we can write font size. So doing this will create two files in the directives folder, that will be font size change.directive.ts and font size change.spec.ts. One is the spec file, as we know, is for the purpose of testing, and the other one is the actual directive file where we will be writing the logics, whatever is required for your directives, and it will also update the directive into the app.module.ts file as well. So if we go here in this one, we can see the font size change directive is added in the declaration array. So that's how you create a directive using the ng-generate command. Okay, I made a mistake in the spelling, so I gave the path as directive, so you can see a separate folder is created. So if you want to add this directive into the directives folder, you will have to write the spelling correctly there. Okay, so that's all about how you can create a directive. Let's check how we can create a pipes now. We are reaching almost at the end of this chapter, and now we will be creating a custom pipe. That is also a core concept, and we already have discussed in our previous chapters that pipe in Angular is a feature that transforms data in templates before displaying it. Pipes are used to format values like text, dates, numbers, and more. Also, whenever you create a custom pipe, you will always implement an interface, that is pipe transform, and pipe transform is an interface provided by Angular that enforces the implementation of a transform method in custom pipes, as the transform method is where the logic for modifying the input value is written, right? So this is just for an information. So while creating the pipe, I will show you that as well. So let's quickly create a folder for having our pipes. Okay, so the plan is to create a exclamation pipe. So wherever you will use this pipe, an exclamation will be added at the end of that text. Also, the text will be converted to the uppercase format. Similar to how we have decorators in other core concepts like component services and directives, which we checked just now, we have a decorator for pipes also, that is @pipe, which also is imported from Angular/core, and we need to define a property inside this decorator, that is name, So let's keep the name for this pipe as exclamation, and let's define the class for the same. So as we discussed, we will be implementing pipe transform interface for a pipe. This is a mandatory step. So for every custom pipe you create, you will have to implement pipe transform, because pipe transform, as we just now discussed, it makes it mandatory to use a transform method. And even if you use a default like built-in pipes of the Angular, there also you will be using a transform method only. So to make that consistency when you are creating a custom pipe, this pipe transform interface makes it mandatory that you also will have to use a transform method for creating a custom pipe. So let's add a transform method. For now we just need one parameter, but based on your requirement you can have multiple parameters there as well. Okay, so what we are doing is whatever value will be coming from the element where this pipe is going to be used, that value will be converted to uppercase, and then an exclamation will be added at the end of that complete value. So this is what pipe creation looks like. Now let's use this pipe in our template. Also one more thing, as we added directives in the declaration array, so we also will have to register this exclamation pipe in our app module. So let's do the same thing here as well, and now we can use this pipe throughout the application. So in our profile component.html, this is a pipe operator which you need to use, and then you will have to provide the name of your pipe, custom pipe. So let's see what output it gives. Okay, so now we can see the letters have been converted to uppercase, and an exclamation is added at the end of the line. So that's how you create a pipe manually. You can do the same using ngGenerate command also. So I'll show you that as well. ngGenerate pipe and the path plus the name of the new pipe, whatever you want to create. So let's say you want to create an XYZ pipe. You will just write this command and press enter. It will update in the app module also, and it will create two files, that is pipe.ts and spec.ts. So even though we have created these files manually, but I would recommend you should use the ngGenerate commands only for creating the files. It maintains the consistency of the file creation throughout the application, and it also reduces the mistakes which we can do by not adding them to our app module or whichever relevant module you are planning to add it to, right? So that is all about the creation of pipes. One more thing, so till now we have discussed almost the basics of component creation, service creation, and directives and pipe creations. We also checked how we can create routings and how we can route to those paths and link those paths to components. So if you say in percentage, you have checked almost 30 to 40% of how your Angular application works, but each of these core concepts what we have discussed have lots of things in depth. For example, components have their life cycle hooks. We need to see how two components can interact with each other, and how we can have child components and parent components interaction. So lots of things are there. Similarly, directives, there are built-in directives, custom directives, built-in pipes, custom pipes. So we will be discussing them one by one in the individual chapters belonging for that specific core concept. Thank you so much for watching the video, guys. If you really enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, share and subscribe our channel and join this amazing community for getting more exciting updates. Also, we have launched this new group, that is Stackmaster Full Stack Dev, on LinkedIn. So you can connect with us there as well. You can connect with other people there and get latest information on full stack development. For more information, you can check the description below. See you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.